Big thing for me working with leaders is having them see the value, because some of the big things I've seen is, again, big things to measure is things like misalignment. Like, I actually like to do the test where I go to the team and says, "Hey, what are we working on? Why are we doing it?" And I ask everybody on the team. And the goal is are we all saying the same message, or are we off doing different messages? When I look and say, where do you track your work? How would I know the status of what the work's going on? And again, if I get different answers, it means, all right, we're missing alignment. And every moment we don't have alignment, we're losing that efficiency that it's needed today.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin Lee with the E-Marketing Association. I also run Did It, a digital-first marketing agency that also does traditional work, including even some inventions I made in the direct mail category. Also own Truth Nutrition, a brand I bought so that I could run any experiment I wanted to without getting in trouble with a client. And I run a nonprofit called Giving Forward in the cause marketing category. Because of all those hats that I wear, a lot of my teams end up using some of the tools that are made by Atlassian. And Mark is joining me today to talk about how important process is in best practices, not just in marketing teams and in software development teams, but just in general. So thanks so much, Mark, for joining us. So for those folks who don't understand the broad suite of products and platforms that Atlassian owns or created, if you want to give a Reader's Digest version of those platforms and how they fit into people's days, that would be really cool.
I love it, Kevin. Hey, thanks so much for having me on. Super excited for this conversation. And so it's funny, Atlassian is one of those brands where sometimes people hear it and they're like, I've never heard of Atlassian. But then they realize they've been living and breathing off of our products for years. Tools like Jira, which is for, work tracking, tools like Confluence for collaboration. We kind of use it for asynchronous building of content. You've also got tools from a software side like our Bitbucket tools, but you also have tools from more of a unstructured work tracking tools like Trello. So I know a lot in the marketing world. I met a lot of people who use Trello. And then one of our latest acquisitions that we've been in love with for years as Atlassian, and it just made sense. It was like them coming home at the end of the day, is Loom. So Loom is an asynchronous video recording software that we use all the time to share ideas, especially abstract ideas, kind of get them out there, and then kind of, again, have that more asynchronous conversation on it. So again, many of the people listening to this has probably used one of our products at some point, and now you know the brand Atlassian.
Yeah, absolutely. So, part of the challenge with any of these platforms or tools is adoption, right? So often somebody in an organization will make the brilliant decision to decide to implement one of your tools, and then, they announce it with great fanfare to their teams. And I would imagine not in every case is there like, excitement among the teams because they're probably doing it a bad way now, but it's the bad way they know, right?
The
Versus the
devil you
new
know
way they
versus
don't
the
know
devil you
yet.
don't, right, Kevin? And that's exactly it. So often they'll go out there and they'll say, "Hey, we've got this new product," without ever consulting the teams or trying to understand how they work.
Right, right. So what are some best practices around involving the teams during the decision-making and procurement process so that they're bought in by the time you announce, oh, we went ahead and we moved forward?
We've signed this giant deal with Atlassian, and now you're all going to be using Jira. Now, I think that's a great idea, but really, it comes down to, and to me, this is kind of where my role at the organization comes into, is helping our customers kind of really understand, specifically those folks who are out there doing that procurement, helping them try to understand what are the problems their teams are trying to solve. Because at the end of the day, we saw this actually all over the place back in 2020. Everyone went remote. We bought all the tools. We thought we saw the spike in productivity. it was kind of what's the phrase I'm thinking of?
The
It's
Hawthorne
almost like
effect, remember?
yeah, exactly. It was the Hawthorne effect. That's exactly it. Where we saw this uptick. We're like, oh wow, we can do this. And the thing is many organizations were doing it all right. The problem is though, is they didn't understand actually how to use the tools to solve the problems. And so it led to then a slide back. And so a lot of times, I work with our customers. Actually, it's funny. Today I was just using Slack talk. That's our asynchronous communication tool. I was slacking with one of our organization's implementation leads about a customer who is starting to think about bringing in some of our products, and we were starting to chat about like here are the things to consider, and like some of the big things were like again working with them to understand, all right, let's talk about how work flows through your system. Like, what are you actually trying to do? Do you have a step by step? Because I could give you a product like Jira that's a nice structured product, but you might be in an organization where there's not a lot of structure, and actually the structure might kind of hinder you. So we might bring in Trello or something like another tool to help you do that. And so for me, I really love getting deep in terms of like discovery. How do you work? What are your goals? How are you like, what does success look like at the end of the day? And so for our customers, that's what we encourage them to do. Go out there and actually have those conversations with your teams, include them in the process. And instead of just rolling something out, just like, all right, cool, we bought 1,000 licenses. Here, everyone use it now. Let's start with an initial group. Get the early adopters. There's always going to be some groups that are like, you know what, the process sucks right now. I want to change it. Cool. Let's bring you in, and what we would kind of call this group is we call it a lighthouse. Like build the lighthouse, show others what's possible, and then use that to start building on the momentum. Yeah, big implementations where you just drop it down. I've never seen work in without a ton of friction, without a ton of bad blood. So it's all about having them kind of lead the way, but by giving them that a foundation to go take with them.
One of the things I've noticed, and a lot of your tools, I think, help facilitate this a little bit, is that this concept of agile, or even
Mm,
Scrum, if you want to think of it that way,
yeah,
right, has sort of bled outside of the software development area into other things like marketing, for example.
yeah,
Right. It used to be back in the 90s. I've been doing marketing since the 90s, right? I mean, media plans were like set in stone by Thanksgiving for the next year, right? And
hmm,
now media and marketing plans are like changing on a week to week and sometimes day to day basis,
yep.
right? And based on data that comes in and results and changes in the marketplace, et cetera, which sort of requires a much more agile mindset. So I'd love to hear how that, I know what's happening in software and I know what's happening in
Yeah.
marketing. So I'd love to hear other areas, maybe HR, et cetera, where the speed of being able to react to change is much higher and that platforms and systems can help facilitate that.
It's fascinating. And I think about like Agile and Scrum and these mechanisms. Things move fast and those help support that. But at the end of the day, even back, 20, 30 years ago, when even software would take a while to develop, Scrum and the kind of that agile perspective actually helped a ton just to help us structure how we did our work. And that's where I've seen it really applicable in groups like HR. I mean, our legal team does this as well because they don't necessarily follow Scrum or something like a specific framework. But what they do is we help them, we work with these different groups to think about things like, all right, how do you break down your work? How do you think about you have a big project you're working on? Awesome. Instead of just saying I'm working on this big project, well, what are some of the pieces? Can we break that down? And now all of a sudden, all right, cool, can we iterate as we're doing it? So even if it's this massive thing that we know it's going to take 6 months to do, there's no way to release it early, fine, awesome, do it in chunks and ask for feedback along the way. It's much easier to course correct every 2 weeks if all of a sudden you find yourself maybe drifting than to get to the end of 6 months and then have to course correct like with a major delta there. And so I found that working with like we got our legal teams to look at this. This was fascinating. We actually had one of our program managers just do a talk on this with somebody where basically he went in and he helped them kind of think about how they looked at their workflow, how he thought about their the breakdown of their work, but then also how that work then connected back up to their goals. And we use objectives and key results or OKRs here. So how do those tie back to the key results that they were measuring? And it was amazing just the transparency and visibility it created. What it did, it gave them the ability to look and say, all right, cool. do some of our lawyers have too much on their plate right now? They're dealing with all this new product development. All of a sudden they're like, oh, no wonder we're not going to be able to get through all these things, in the next 3 months because we've got 4 people doing all that work and we've got these other 6 that may not have anything on their plate. But it was because we used to just say, oh yeah, Stan's got that one. I'll give it to Stan. It gives them structure and intention around their work. And so whether you're legal, you could be HR, thinking about whether it be even things like, hey, we've gotten benefits enrollment at the end of the year. Cool. What are the things we have to do between now and then to get to there? We can't just start benefits enrollment now, but there are things we can do to make that a smooth process by building in kind of that intentional cadence and synchronization into our work. So for me, I think that's one of the biggest things that agility has brought into non-software teams is the fact that, hey, we all work with workflows. We all work with chunks of work. How do we now create a little bit more structure around that so that way we can now actually have some more predictability, focus more on where we're trying to get to versus just, I got to get this project done.
Yeah, one thing I'd love to get your perspective on, and I think this is something that not just high growth organizations struggle with, but like even teams within big organizations, which is, you think sort of, I'll just throw more people at this, right?
Oh yeah.
But
Remember
when
that
you
from
throw more,
I used to do a lot of project management stuff, and they had the term for that. They called it crashing a project. We're like, just throw more people at it. But the
yeah,
thing is it never worked. It never worked.
yeah. But you do need to obviously trying to have to grow, to find the roles and responsibilities at the meta level, all the way down to the project management tactical level. You need to
Yep.
figure out how to divide and conquer the workload, right? And in sort of Agile and Scrum, you sort of, you have this concept of who's the next best person at this,
Hmm.
right? Since the person that's best at is actually underwater, who's the next best, right?
Yep.
So are there similar things that you've seen work in other categories about like teaming people up and not adding the
Mhm.
process loss? Because if you just add layers to
Oh yeah.
management overhead, that just increased costs.
We're a big advocate of this idea of autonomy with alignment. And what I mean by this is that when you look at Atlassian teams, we not one team operates the same as the other, but the idea is that there are certain structures in place to allow them to connect back up with the rest of the organization. And the reason we can do that is because we've really emphasized the importance of what we consider these teamwork foundations. For us, we think that regardless of the group, you could be, the development team, you could be a legal team, you could be an HR team, a marketing team. There are teamwork foundations that you need to have in place to help give you things like the alignment, the understanding of roles and responsibilities. We have a number of these activities that we have all of our teams do that's based on content in our Atlassian team playbook. Now, the team playbook, it's a free resource we have out there online. If you just look up Atlassian team playbook, you'll find it. It's basically 52 plus different practices that we have that talk about the different ways of working we have at Atlassian. And we've found over the years of using these, sharing them. I mean, these are the things we do that for us, there's 4 core ones that really every team needs in order to be able to kind of get that alignment. So that way, when you think about like, all right, cool, we're underwater. Who's the next person can take this? We can have that clarity because most of the time when we're underwater, the person who's underwater may not actually be working on the most important stuff either. And so the way we look at it is that every team needs to have what we call a team poster. It means it's their picture of like, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? How do we measure success? All those different elements you need to understand as a team in terms of your why. We need to have clear roles and responsibilities. We need to make sure that we understand, all right, what type of roles do we need? And those aren't the same thing as job titles. It's really like, what are the functions we need in our group? And then what are those functions responsible for? We've also set up this idea of working agreements. Like these are collaboration contracts. I think these are some of the most important artifacts that a team can have because it's all about coming up with like those agreed upon patterns for how we work together and when all of a sudden, let's say I'm underwater, how do I raise my hand and say, oh, I need help? And then finally, for us, we look at this aspect that we don't believe any team can get anything done by itself. We believe that teams will need other teams. And so we also run this exercise called a network of teams, where every 6 months we encourage our teams to go out there and actually look at the teams they work with and identify where the relationships are strong and where there's weak. Because for us, work is a people sport, and as much as you can go into a tool and mark something as a dependency, you got to have a conversation with another team. You have to figure out what that process is like. And so for us, we have our teams run that network of teams. So if you think about those four core practices there, for us, we have our teams run these. So that way, all of a sudden, if I get myself in a situation where, let's say, I feel like I'm underwater, are we going in the right direction? Do we need other people? Now, all of a sudden, the team has clarity because they know what they're doing. They know who's doing what. They have an agreement of how they escalate, and they know how they reach out to other teams. And so for us, it's a really core thing for us, and we share that out with our customers as well. Because again, a fool with a tool is still a fool, just a faster fool in our opinion. So we got to give them those foundations.
Yeah, absolutely. So for folks who are sort of thinking, oh, my post-it note system is great. I don't really need anything
Uh,
new or digital.
right, exactly. We all got some of these that actually all over our desk, right?
Right. Um, but when you take a process, let's say one that's not horribly broken, but one
Hmm.
that's sort of typically, broken, and you start to add best practices into it, what kind of efficiency improvements would you typically see? Just for folks who are sort of trying to think through the ROI of a platform, right?
Yeah,
Because obviously the CFO is going to say, well, the post-it note system's great, and the post-it notes are
exactly.
cheap.
See, as a post-it note system, I know exactly what I have to do. Do they know what you need to do? Do they know what I'm doing? And I think
Right.
that's what a big piece of this is for us. Is it goes back to transparency, especially you mentioned it earlier with this aspect that we're living in an age right now where we are moving faster and faster. And so even in like the marketing world, where in a single day you might change your approach, you need to make sure you have those mechanisms in place that allow you to essentially collaborate quickly without necessarily saying, all right, cool, I have this knowledge. How do I make sure you have it as well? Now, a big thing for me is I'm always going to say you need to have the tooling to help you gain that efficiency because I believe that process gives you effectiveness, tooling gives you efficiency, but you need to start with that effectiveness piece. And so for me, as I'm thinking about the way our teams work, we're going to sit down and be like, all right, I have sticky notes. I have that mechanism to share, ideas back and forth with people. All right, cool. How do we move quicker? How do we share ideas? How do we collaborate, build new content based on that? We can then look at the reasons for that and then say, all right, let's say we do need to have a team that's distributed around the world to be able to collaborate. Cool. We're going to need something else. I actually like to say, let's find a simple tool we can start with. When I usually get teams together, I actually start them using tools like Trello at first, just to be able to be like, it's so flexible. It allows you to kind of create columns and work because columns really represent workflow steps, kind of create what you need, work your process. And then once we've solidified that, we can say, cool, do we feel comfortable with how that plays out? We can then move into solidifying how we work into a tool like Jira or another product out there. But the goal being is I'm trying to show that you needed to have that process first. You needed to understand how you worked. You almost had to, value stream it out. And then from there, you can then go in and say, all right, now let's talk about the efficiency piece. Because if we want to move quicker, we know we're going to need that. But if we're just going to start with that product, we're never going to get to where we need to be because we'll always end up going faster in the wrong direction. So, big thing for me working with leaders is having them see the value because some of the big things I've seen is again, big things to measure is things like misalignment. Like, I actually like to do the test where I go to the team and says, hey, what are we working on? Why are we doing it? And I ask everybody on the team. And the goal is are we all saying the same message or are we off doing different messages? When I look and say, where do you track your work? How would I know the status of what the work's going on? And again, if I get different answers, it means, all right, we're missing alignment. And every moment we don't have alignment, we're losing that efficiency that it's needed today. And so for me, those are some of the things that I'll be working with teams on. And those are like some of the first questions before I bring in anything of like a tool in. It's let's just talk about how you work today and where are there just glaring gaps in your process. Because once we fill those, a tool will easily reflect whatever it is you do.
So, switching gears a bit to marketing and how your role as an evangelist going out there and preaching best practices, it seems like looking at your LinkedIn profile, that a lot of that has been a resurgence of events. right? So you've been up on stage, evangelizing best practices, educating, etc. And it seems like a bunch of people learn better in that environment, right? Or absorb the information better in that environment. So trade shows are back, conferences are back,
Oh, I know, right?
those things are sort of back. So I'd love to as it relates to just generally people coming up to speed, or people when you're out there marketing and you're at events that are not specific to only you, right? So it's not
Yep.
your internal event, but this is you as a guest speaker somewhere else. How valuable do you think that is to your overall marketing scheme? I mean, obviously
Mhm.
you're there, so you probably
Oh yeah,
think
yeah,
it's
exactly.
more
We're there.
valuable
Well, and,
than.
and for us, we think there's a right mixture of this. And so for us, we do believe that we want to make sure that we're present where people want to do deep learning. And for us, deep learning is happens at these events now. That's what people are going there. Same thing we would do when the fact is what many organizations still, work in a distributed manner. When they come together, the focus is to go deep and really like soak something in. And so we're like, we want to be present there. So we do spend about, I would say, 35% to 50% of our time going out to events to simply going to have these conversations. And when we do it, what we try to do is we try to do workshops. We try to do master classes. I actually just did one last week at an HR Global Congress that was going on in Europe. And the whole point of it was, yes, I gave a talk on like how we work at Atlassian, but more importantly, we did a hands-on workshop where we had CHROs, we had SVPs of people coming together, and we sat down for about 90 minutes and we played with different ways to gain team alignment because for our opinion and HR's opinion too is they're leading the charge for helping teams come together. So we're like, we want to give you the tools. And so I found that those are really good mechanisms to help again engage people on that kind of deeper connection level because we're face to face with each other to be able to learn a concept, play with it, and ask questions. And so for us, it's really big for us to go out there to these sorts of events. We've actually as Atlassian, we've been starting to show up to more and more events since COVID now. We've been at Adobe Summit, we've been at even the PMI Global Summit. We're going to be at Inbound coming up later this year. And our whole goal at being at these things is to say, one, hey, just like I mentioned earlier, sometimes you don't know the Atlassian brand, but you know our products. And so we want to give you an idea of what we do and why we do it. And then be able to hopefully go deeper with you and talk to you about the actual problems you're trying to solve versus just, hey, here's a cool new product we've got. Let's actually figure out what you're trying to solve because we found we can have really good, deep conversations there. So for us, going out to these marketing events are huge just because they give us that opportunity to go deeper with some of these, with our current customers as well as prospective customers.
It sounds like from the way you're describing it that a big focus of the events is even though the products are there, it's
Yeah.
really an educational touch point where you're just giving rather than asking, right? So you're not
Yeah.
asking to sign up or anything. You're just basically saying, I'll give you some best practices. Even if you choose to go back and try to do it with a legal pad, it's probably better
Oh
than what
yeah.
you're doing
I've
now.
I've got customers who use our competitors, and I'll be like, cool, that's totally fine. You use a competitor. Our goal, our mission at Atlassian is to unleash the potential of every team. It's not to world domination with Jira. It's truly unleashing that potential. And one of those mechanisms is going out there and sharing with you our practices. Because what we find time and time again too is you go out there and you use our practices and you're like, wow, this is really good. Like this is actually helping me. And what we'll try to do again to give you that like little bit of efficiency is you'll find that actually built into our tools, the way we reflect our practices, and would you build them in as templates and workflows and things like that into our product. So now all of a sudden I talk about those 4 practices that we do for teamwork foundations. You launch Confluence and boom, those templates are there waiting for you. That's how we encourage that. And so one of the things we found is that customers were really, prospects that they see our practices, they play with them. They're like, hey, I decided to come back and play with your tools because I realized, I saw the templates, I saw the different like the different ways that you're encouraging it. And I says I wanted to try it actually in the product, and then that exposed them to things. And so I'm a big, I work for a company who had a value, and I believe that is one of the things that we live by as well is that dollars and cents follow, they don't lead. It's this idea that if I show you these practices, if I help you get better, you'll actually find that that means we built that into our product. So you'll eventually find your way back to Atlassian. And so for us, doing that actually is way more effective and builds so much more. Oh, what's the word I'm looking for? It's more like connection and trust than just simply saying, "Hey, I've got Loom. It's a great product. You want to buy it?" Like actually helping them solve those problems regardless just builds so much more of that trust, credibility with us.
So you guys have embraced certainly the live in-person face-to-face events, and
Hmm.
probably during the pandemic you had fully embraced the webinars, the
Hmm.
roundtables, and the online workshops. So where's the pendulum now, right? Is it sort of 50-50? Like how do you guys decide
Yeah.
how much effort to put into sort of the reaching the folks who don't attend the events, either because they don't have the budget or they don't have the
Yeah.
time, but they can, they can take an hour, 3 hours, even maybe even a half a day to attend something online.
It's one of those things. So for us, we definitely, it is probably about a 50-50 on that. I do a lot of events. Actually, I've got one coming up here in just a few weeks with it's an all virtual event with the goal being is that they put it out there. That way it is, exposed to, I think it's called Agile Con. And so it gets out to about 5,000 people who, to your point, they may not be able to make it out to a large event, but they can come in and tune in for this event for like pennies on the dollar kind of thing. We also do a lot of online content for us. So a big push for us at Atlassian, and actually my team in particular, has been how do we get content out into people's hands to help them think about some of these ideas? We do a lot of free university courses. Actually, most all of our university courses at Atlassian are free now. So all the learnings, things like that, we'll do videos where we'll do little tutorials walking you through these ideas. We have LinkedIn Live sessions that we do constantly to help kind of share these ideas, interact with folks. And then, of course, we do our own online events with Atlassian. So we have webinars, we even still have, large roundtables that we do that are online with the whole goal being is to be able to showcase these ideas and hopefully a mechanism that anyone can consume. Our whole idea is that kind of omni-channel approach. We're going to have a core concept. Let's get it out into all these different mediums, and some of those are going to be the high intensity deep learnings out of like an in-person event. Some of these are going to be widespread, LinkedIn live sessions that we post on our Atlassian channel, and so for us, we've looked at multiple different threads here to help us kind of think about how do we get this content out there, because again, that's our goal is purely get the practices in the hands of folks so that they can actually start playing with them. And sometimes some people learn and consume one place, other people's consume in another. So if we hit both, we're in a good spot.
Yeah, it's interesting that the way you describe it about sort of covering all the different mediums and all the different channels from an education and learning and best
Hmm.
practices perspective is because a lot of folks don't realize the long-term SEO and visibility implications of that, right?
Hmm.
Either from the perspective of old school SEO, which is I'd love to get my domain to rank, or my
Yeah.
domains in the cases of your various product domains, or even just what they like to call barnacle SEO, which is I'd love to get a bunch of other places to rank, maybe our LinkedIn page or other social
Hmm.
media pages where we have that content syndicated out to. But the next
Hmm.
generation that people forgetting to prepare for now, or some of the more savvy folks are, is well, what if somebody asks an LLM, a chatbot, a question, and there's only
Hmm.
one result? What's
Yeah.
the best insert question here, right? You're
Yeah.
going to get one
How do we
result.
make sure that we're relevant to those
Yeah,
LLMs?
yeah,
All of a
exactly.
sudden, again, they're going to be using what I found is some of the most loudest content out there. Some of the stuff that keeps hitting. They'll be like, this has become a popular hit. And so for us, it is I joke around is like my part of my goal is to be noisy. Like I want to be noisy. I want you to have heard about our stuff and see it pop up in different places.
Exactly.
And I find that if we can hit those different channels, we can start seeing things like the chatbots start popping up and saying, hey, have you thought about this for maybe your better meetings content? Hey, go take this Atlassian course that has been hit and referenced multiple times across all these
Exactly.
different platforms.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the thing is, a lot of marketers, because it's more difficult to demonstrate to the CFO the ROI of that, right? They're
Oh, I
not
know, right?
engaging in that kind of high level of content creation, high level of content syndication, co-creating content with partners, a lot of those things, you know, it's a little fuzzy, the ROI calculation, but I think you guys have demonstrated just in where you are now that that kind of stuff, being a thought leader in the category,
Hmm.
subject matter experts in the category, that kind of stuff manifests itself in the end, in your sales number. But as you said, the sales number is a byproduct of all that other stuff. It's not the primary
It's not the
focus.
thing that we focus on,
Yeah.
and I think that's where it's been really great to see even like my team within our organization. Like I've been doing this as part of the organization for about 2 years now, and we've grown ourselves. We've got three of us that are out there hitting it around the world doing this, and we've also got other evangelist type roles in different parts of marketing that also do this. And so for us, the company has really looked at it and says, you know what? We've realized that we need to be one out there talking with folks, but also sharing some of these different perspectives. Like we have evangelists who are much more deeper into a particular space like DevOps or marketing or something like that. We have people like myself that are much more broad. We talk about practices and as the foundation. And then we have people who even talk about our products. But what we really focus in on is how do we make sure that each of those people are also telling us the same message at the underlying string. And what we found is when we can do that, when we can align everybody, all of a sudden, again, you start seeing this consistency and message from Atlassian, which at the end of the day, we all had it. We were all always consistent as like what we believed. But our biggest trick was now all of a sudden, how do we make sure externally we're saying the same story? And I think that's been a really cool thing to watch as we've matured and grown because, over the last 5 years, we've quadrupled in size as an organization. It's been a muscle for us to grow and for us trying to get out to all these mechanisms, have the right voices in the right places. It's been neat to watch us grow, and I feel like we are continuing to evolve it as we go. And what we're seeing is we're starting to see those results. And I think to that point of like the ROI, it's fascinating because even like for our co-founders, one of the things that they've asked us before is like, man, I like, what's the return? Is this tied directly to a sale? And we're like, not yet. And then all of a sudden, 6 to 12 months later, they're in a channel in Slack and they see that they closed a deal somewhere. And then they're like, oh, hey, and we also want to call out, so and so from the evangelism team for getting the ball rolling with this customer and actually talking with us. And then they'll say, oh, I see what you guys do now. So there is some of that show and tell, but a lot of what we're doing is we're planting seeds, and those seeds aren't going to necessarily grow right away. We've got to cultivate that, and that's where we'll work with our extended team to help us get that done.
Yeah, I think that's a huge lesson, in particular for B2B marketers, and the
Mm,
larger the commitment of the sale, typically
mhm.
the longer it takes for the seeds to germinate, right, and grow.
100%.
And so, I get concerned during times where you hear the recession word or, marketing austerity or whatever you want to call it, where,
Mhm.
marketing teams sort of forget about the fact that it's, especially in B2B, it's going to take a while for some of these seeds that you plant to grow, right? So just understanding at least
Mhm.
where the most fertile areas to plant are, right, is key, right, from a priority perspective.
100%. And I think another big thing that I find, especially in times of like when the big R word gets thrown around, that recession kind of aspect, is that it emphasizes more and more this aspect of relationships too. Because it's the thing is at the end of the day, when the belt starts squeezing, we have to start thinking a lot more about how we're doing things. It's the companies, it's the marketing teams, the companies that have built a relationship with their customers in a way that's like they can't see them losing that relationship. We've actually had customers who at the end of the day says, you know what, we've had to cut back. We've cut back on some of our licenses, but we're like, we trust you all. You are our strategic advisors. We can't lose you. And so for some companies, they're out there and they're like, cool, we'll cut all those licenses. We'll move them on to something else. There was never a relationship there. For us, there always has to be a relationship. And I think that's one of the things that gets missed a lot is again, we're like, cool, let's sell that. Let's move it quickly. Anything that moves quickly doesn't have a strong relationship behind it. And so you almost have to do that. So when you go into those times of potential recession, you go into those times of slowdowns, those relationships are the things that are going to actually keep you moving forward at the end of the day versus those deals that you had that when the money was flowing.
Right, right. Great point. Well, Mark, thanks so much for sharing best practices and your vision for, how to, do the right thing regardless of which technology you use.
Exactly. Thanks so much, Kevin. It's been a blast. And again, I encourage all your listeners, if you're looking for good practices, go check out that Atlassian team playbook. We've got some great stuff out there for marketing teams, HR teams, just any team that really can use to help kind of superpower how you work together. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's about how we work as teams. And if we can figure that out, sky's the limit.
Perfect. Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in the Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.